Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 124 of the Near Memo. Today with Mike Blumenthal and me, Greg Sterling, where we talk about all things local. David Mim is out, but we'll be back next week. Welcome back. And today we're going to be talking about Google support ambassadors, brand ambassadors, I guess they're calling them. We're also going to be talking
Google
about
Google
ambassadors, not brand ambassadors. We're also going to be talking about SGE while browsing and kind of the emerging phenomenon of AI-generated review summaries now on Amazon and Newegg and sort of on Google, but will be more widespread in the not too distant future. So, Mike, why don't you kick it off with the ambassador item?
So I was in the Google Forums last week, which is staffed by volunteers, what are called product experts, and I came upon a problem that I hadn't seen too much. So I was curious if I went through the Google Forums, or the Google contact information, how they would present a solution to me. The Google contact support as a three-step process where you define the problem, they show you resources that might or probably won't help, and then they give you contact options for that problem. As I was doing this, I discovered that Google has added a new layer to their support, to their first level of support, which is to chat with a Google ambassador. And when I dug into it, I discovered that a Google ambassador is run by a third-party company called Limitless Gig CX.
Which is a great name, by the way.
And they tout the fact that when you go to their site, they talk about how your company could hire passionate brand ambassadors to solve all these problems. And really all that happy talk is about passionate brand ambassadors is, when you dig to the bottom of it, is gig workers and the promise from this company that they will save you money. And a friend of mine who has been a Google product, quote unquote, product expert or top contributor in the Google Forum since 2007, and has contributed more support than any human being that I know of. He's one of the few diamond contributors he does. He's just done tens of thousands of.
So diamond is above platinum.
Diamond is above platinum. I'm platinum. I'm a platinum. He's diamond, so level above.
I didn't know that. You're now at platinum. You got from silver to platinum pretty quickly.
That's right. I got demoted from whatever gold down to silver, and then I got re-promoted back to platinum. I'm now platinum. Anyways, he sent me this little note. He said, Google's creativity in terms of support, in air quotes, seems to never exhaust itself in constantly coming up with new titles, badges, and functions. I can't even remember how often I was reclassified and renamed since 2009 when I started as a top contributor. This is as they keep changing the forums, they keep changing the rules and gamifying how the top contributor support works. And he goes on to say, instead of worrying about suitable procedures for reporting and solving problems and a comprehensible workflow for problem processing, these new Google ambassadors are now being introduced as a third cohort. That's a pretty ridiculous move, in my opinion, hiding Google's own inability to support their products and end users as a filthy rich global player. I would say it's not their inability to support their products and users, it's their unwillingness to support their products and users. I mean, Google does support only because they have to, and they basically create these very long queues, so it feels like you're moving, often when you're not. And this new Google Ambassador program was just like that. I spent an hour on an answer I knew could only be solved by Google higher level support, and it took an hour for them to finally offer that choice to me. So I had to go through the back and forth. And finally, they offered to pass me off to a higher level support at Google. But then I got a notice that they won't be in touch with me for 24 hours. So it took me an hour of my time plus waiting for 24.
So how is this different from a contact center, from an offshore contact center, for example?
Well, the big difference from my point of view is that there's no, it's a gig. They're paid by the answer, not by the job. In theory, a contact and support center could build skill sets and training protocols to ensure that low level training, that low level first level of contact support is good. It never has been at Google because they've largely outsourced it. Google has a multi tiered approach where I think there's probably three tiers. First tier is this, has historically been very low level support, gets referred internally to that third party contractor, elevated support, and then goes to somebody in Google. So Google has worked very hard to isolate their staff from support questions. They put million roadblocks in the way, whether it's at first tier support, now that's ambassador. So the big difference in the ambassador program and their current poor level support is sort of this another channel, right? So it doesn't appear that they've gotten rid of their channels in India. It looks like this is in addition to it. So now people who are not properly trained have to look up an answer and get back to you, and ultimately, for the most part, tell you they can't do anything about it. They might refer you to support. So again, it looks like a filtering mechanism. Most people would have left long before the hour was up and would not have stayed with it. And it's problematic on two fronts. One is it's the illusion of support. You feel like you're moving when you're really not.
Well, many Google is not alone in offering that. That's a very common phenomenon.
Right. The issue there though
Support
is
customer support theater.
right. The issue though here is that Google is the monopoly and the primary provider of leads to these businesses. So when their product screws up, which it does regularly, there's no easy mechanism to recover. And from my point of view, being a monopoly imposes certain greater obligations that they should have, but they don't. So not only does this add one more layer, a slow layer to support, it also creates another population of exploited workers that are working per answer. And Google, being one of the wealthiest cash rich companies in the world,
Well,
this
so Google,
monopoly should be held to a higher standard.
well,
Simple as that.
Google has not been officially designated a monopoly, even though de facto they are. And
So that gives them the excuse to fuck people and businesses.
well, I mean, legally, yes, right? I mean, if they were a
I get
regulated
it.
if they were a regulated utility, there would be certain obligations that would be imposed upon them um, externally. And the culture of Silicon Valley is such that you really want to minimize the number of humans involved in any given task, right? I mean, there's a bias toward machines and against humans, except where absolutely necessary. And this is an illustration of that. And overall, my experience of customer support is that it's getting worse and worse and worse. And this is against the backdrop of increasingly sophisticated technology and AI and all these tools which purport to empower agents and uh, f- provide greater efficiency and so on and so forth. And so
Right.
there's this very strange, I can go into personal experiences, which I won't, that have just been absolutely horrendous recently. But that's another.
Yeah,
My
I don't know if it
temptation is
was
great to digress into stories, but I won't do it.
back in
What about
2012 or 13, though. I remember, I think it was the CEO of Verizon sort of looking at and publicly commenting on how successfully Google had managed to minimize support costs, looking at it enviously,
Well,
as a
that's how companies view support. They view customer service and support as a cost center, not as a marketing expense, not as a thing that's going to yield customer loyalty or brand benefits. They absolutely have it wrong, absolutely wrong. Now, in Google's case, because of their market position, they can get away with delivering terrible support because no, but what else? People have to use them. There isn't any real competition. I mean, there was just an article in the Wall Street Journal, I think, today, where they were talking about how Bing GPT, with all of the sort of bells and whistles that they've added and all the buzz and all the exposure that it's gotten, has not moved the needle on market share at all. They've
right.
seen some growth, but it's really not very meaningful. but that's another discussion. So, last question is sort of what about AI? What is the future of GBP support and AI? One would think that Google is going to inject AI into the mix pretty quickly. At some,
They certainly have a great training set in their forums and in the questions that come into them. I think that well-designed AI could move somebody through the process more quickly as opposed to more slowly, which is really the hazard of this current extra layer. I mean, this layer feels like you're getting human support. You're actually interacting with a human, but
it
you're not getting
injects
support.
delay into the process.
It ultimately injects delay. So I do see AI as potentially being able to do this, but obviously they are the best AI, one of the best AI companies in the world, and haven't quite got there. So,
Well,
but
once
part of
they
the problem is, as that poster that shared with me pointed out, they've been unwilling to put in place clear processes and procedures to solve the many problems that they have in their software. So some of it comes from creating better software. Some of it comes from having proper procedures. Now, we have seen over the past few weeks, and this is largely due, I think, to the DSA rules in Europe, improved forms for certain problems that have not had forms before. So now you can actually go to Google, go to the contact support. You can describe problem. Up pops a choice. When you select that choice, up pops, after the thing trying to delay you by reading stuff, up pops a form. That's new, and that is improved processes. So maybe they're moving that way. And if they have enough of those forms and enough people they can direct who can solve these problems, then AI could fit into that and be less painful and quicker than this current ambassador program, which from what I can see is, as you point out, just theater.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.